Just like with the previous Kickstarter, I've decided to get in touch with a few game developers to bring you interviews and insights about how they create games. We got in touch with MrHelmut, the co-founder of FlyingOak Games and the developer behind Scourgebringer and Neurovoider before that. They are currently working on Scourgebringer, a fast-paced platform action game, and the interesting thing about that game is that there's a lot of juice to the gameplay. The controls feel really snappy. On top of that, the developers are really open about their process. In this interview, Thomas is sharing lots of insights about how they create games at FlyingOak Games. Prototyping, the use of tools, we talk a bit about sound in this interview. You can find lots of links in the description to find the tools and the websites mentioned. Also, sorry for the sound at the beginning, my USB mic crashed and I only noticed it after we went through a fair part of the interview. I hope you'll still enjoy it. See you at the end.
We have two kind of way to find ideas and prototyping. So first and most obviously there is game jams. We do a lot of game jams. We come from this generation of game jam designers. We are two guys in the studio and we both met together on a game jam. We made a lot of game jam together before starting the company. We often still make game jam or organize game jams and do internal game jams when we have something like free time in between projects. So that's one way to get ideas flowing. The other one is we list several things we like in games or we would like to test in games. And we also list things we don't like and don't want to try. At first, we take stuff on that list and we try to fast prototype things, like trying to do one prototype a day. If there is something that we feel may be worth trying, we extend that to 1 week. If we find out that something is not quite fun, or something is missing, or we don't find something relevant within several days, we pick something from the list of things we don't like and we try to force ourselves to put that, like trying to introduce a perturbation into your way of thinking. It kind of breaks something, but it allows you to think in a way you're not thinking otherwise. We believe a lot in serendipity, introducing stuff that helps you to break your habits and break your way of thinking. If you do everything the same every day, that you wake up at the same hour, that you arrive at your office, take your coffee, look at your emails, and if everything is the same process every day, at least we can't stimulate ourselves to find new stuff. So we introduce something new to our daily life, or we remove something, and we just see what happens. And that's how we try to introduce creativity. On our latest game, the game that we are currently making, Scourgebringer, when we started to make the game, one of the things that we didn't want to do is a platformer. Making a platformer is something that requires a lot of skills in the design, in the mastery of the physics, of the level design, of how the controls works. It's something that is very, very fine-grained to get something that is super satisfying. We felt like it wasn't possible for us, that we didn't add enough confidence into what we were doing. At some point, we told ourselves, well, let's just try to make something of its platforms out of this. Very quickly, we noticed that we had all the keys to understand what are the common problems and pitfalls when designing a platformer, and that we ended up in a very little time to design quite a satisfying physics and controls. We started to refine it, and after a week or so, we were pretty satisfied and pretty curious about what we just made, and we were looking at ourselves and we were like, this could be a game. And yes, that's what happened. When you are surprised of what you've just made, it's usually a good sign that there is something to dig with this. When we start to work on an idea, we try to first see the big picture. we cut down this idea into as many little pieces as we can, the smallest one. Like if we are designing a platformer, we are first trying to design what's a jump. We design a jump, we prototype the jump, and we test and fine-tune the jump until it feels satisfying. And we try to do that for every single aspect of the game. If every single thing is satisfying on its own, we try to level up and see how things connect together from a great view. If things connect, it's cool. If they don't, we do another pass of polishing or on redesigning things, or maybe removing some things or adding new ones. And we try to cut down anything into the most microscopic things possible, and then we go up.
So you work on the individual mechanics and then you connect them. How do you test the game and refine the controls? How do you figure out which are the best values to make the game design cohesive and the game experience work well?
Well, there's no magic to this. It's a lot of testing. When we have something that we feel like is relevant, we start to test it, and we test several values. And we try to put as many customizable values into our prototype, like adding sliders for any kind of thing. Like if you have a platformer, we start to tweak gravities, we start to tweak the limit values, the grace frames, and so on when you jump. And we try to tweak all of them while we are playing, and we have something into our prototype to save values into presets so that we can remember which kind of values were satisfying and so on. When we have something that is quite satisfying, we start to widen our playtest group with people from our office neighbors who are also doing games and so on, maybe people from our community. And we try to grow this playtest as we further refine all the values from the feedback that we get on the playtest. But yeah, it's mostly about testing a lot and tweaking values, and there's no specific process or magic rules about numbers.
At this point, you don't have the visuals yet, right? You still are working mostly with placeholders.
Yeah, we mostly have placeholders.
At what point do you bring the visuals, the characters, the story in the game?
Quite late into the prototyping process. When we have something that we prototype is quite okay, satisfying, I feel like, okay, this is a game. We start to connect everything that is graphics, universe, and story, and so on. I believe that in this way we design a game a bit differently from other companies, because basically when you do a game, you have two ways of thinking. You're either doing a story-based design, so you start by imagining what's the world, what's the universe you want to go with, and then you bring up a kind of gameplay and something we want to build upon. And we are doing this the other way around. We first think about the gameplay and what's the game, because we first want to do entertainment in the arcade way, something that is instantly fun. And so when we have something satisfying from a prototype, we then try to imagine what kind of context, what kind of story, what kind of character we can work with and try to bring in there. And then we start to bring in ideas, different kind of characters, what are going to be the playable character or anything. And we build upon this. It's pretty fun because we can imagine crazy things into the gameplay we've been doing. So it doesn't mean that we don't do story at all in our game, because when we further go into pre-production and so on, we develop stories. But at first, the embryo of the game is pure gameplay to us.
I was looking at your Twitter feed and the little tool you've been using to animate parts of the environment. And so I wanted to ask you which tools or processes you use to give life to your environment, to your game. Do you have some tips to share about that to improve the visual feedback and the overall feel?
The main tool that we are using is a Sprite, a pixel art drawing and animation tool. It's dedicated to a pixel art and video game, and it works very, very well. It's just super convenient. It's like the best thing possible to do pixel art stuff, but it doesn't quite help into juicing things up. We found out about a tool very recently which calls JuiceFX, a tool that allows you to pre-bake animation, wobbles, shakes, deformations, and you can compose this kind of animation into layers, into sequences. And at the end, it produces a sprite sheet that you can directly import into either a sprite or directly into your game, and it works super well. It's a lot of time saved from doing all this juicy animation. All of this is animating pixel by hand. If you want to do a shake or a wobble, it's something that you can do somehow in code. But when you are doing pixel art, and if you want to have perfect control over different pixels, the colors and so on, you may want to do that directly into the animation and animate this yourself. That's how Florian is doing so. Previously, he was doing everything by hand. When we found out about JuiceFX, it helped a lot to save time. It's not something very magical in the sense that it's not about filling values, producing a sprite sheet and calling it a day. You still have to clean up the different animation if you want something to be very clean and satisfying. It can help to have pretty simple feedback very quickly to add some cool joys to many things and make them less static and so on. So yeah, that's one of the tools we are using. We are also using tools. It's a tool that is called Pixel. It allows you to filter textures to make them one bit of color. It filters colors and makes them fit into a palette of colors that you want. So we use this to pre-make background textures or some textures. It may also help to find ideas of textures. We don't take stock photos, put them into this tool, and ta-da! It makes something that we can use directly into a game. It's not the idea. The idea is to take images of textures that we would like to work with, or that may have contains useful stuff or ideas that we can maybe try into a game, and we put them into this tool to filter them into a pixel art-like style. Then we reprocess that, we rework that, we refine that, we build new ideas upon, and it's something that helps us to have more ideas and have more varied things, more patterns. So it's mostly about this. We're not using any other specific tools other than the tools that we are making ourselves, because I am a big fan of tools and I like to make all kind of tools. We have a shitload of tools that I've been making and that we have for making our games. We are working with Mono and a library that is called MonoGame. And it's something pretty simple because it's just a wrapper. It's not an engine. It's not something that you can expect to bring you entity objects and so on. It's something quite low level in the end. It's just a wrapper of graphics, audio, and inputs, and it also brings useful stuff like sprite batchers, typical types like vectors, rectangles, and so on. But it's still something, very low level, because you have to code your own engine behind, code your own collision handlings, physics, and so on. So it's not something I would recommend to anybody willing to jump directly into game making. But it's pretty neat for 2D games because it comes with a bunch of helper classes that can allow you to quickly make cross-platform games with 2D and so on.
Can we talk a bit about sound? Do you make sound yourself? Do you have someone to make sound for you?
In our first games, we were making sound ourselves, and it was one hell of a pain in the ass, because it's very difficult to make sound. It takes a lot of time. Also, it takes most obviously money, because you can't create sound out of the blue. You have to use some bank sounds, and most bank sounds and most good bank sounds are paid. So we bought banks and we started to work out of this, and most sound doesn't fit what we are doing. We try to fiddle with multiple sounds, try to combine them, try to boost the bass, boost the treble, cut them, and so on. And it's a very long process. We realized that, yeah, sound design is a job on its sound. And we are completely bad at doing this. We noticed that we didn't want to make sound ourselves when we had to add a new sound, a new specific sound into our game, and none of us was willing to do it. We was just like staring into the eyes and like, oh, do it yourself. No, do it you. No. And that's when we decided that on our future game, we would have a dedicated sound designer, and sound designer, we wanted it to kick ass, because sound design is something that in the end is very, very important. It adds so much to the choice of the game, to the game feel, to the general homogeneity of the game. And so that's why in our new game, Scourgebringer, we are working with Jonas Turner, who's a guy who've been making games for Blambeer for years, for many other games, and he's also done his own game, Tormentor, X-Cross Punisher. He's the kind of guy that we clearly identify to, because we like very arcade game and very punchy game. So he was like the one and only person that we could think about when we were thinking about sound design. He works way faster than we could, and he also has a lot of ideas, and it brings so much more life into a game and so much more things and impact. Yeah, the sound is as important as the visuals. You can't forget about it. One day someone told me something, the sound designer, Antoine Gray. If you close your eye, or if you hear someone playing to a game without looking at the game, you should be able to know what the game is and what's happening currently in the game just by hearing it. That's when something clicked. It's the identity it's one of the identity of the game. You must be able to recognize the game by its sound as much as you should be able to recognize the game just by its visuals. It's a very important aspect, and so from now on, it's something that we are going to work on a lot with cool people. And most sound designers are very, very cool people.
Can you tell us where people can find you, follow your next game? And I've seen that you are making a newsletter, weekly devlog, where you share tips as well. That could be quite useful to game designers. So tell us about all that.
We are doing an open development. We are speaking about how we are making our next game from the very beginning. We started making this newsletter when the game wasn't even an idea. We described exactly what I've been telling you here, because we started with multiple prototypes and we explained how we make it grow and when we started to put the story in it. We're also talking about budget. We are pretty open about budget, just to be transparent of how a game company works. It's not just like making game, it's also doing work for other people and so on to make everything running and keep going with doing the game that we want to do. So we have this newsletter that can be found on our website, FlyingOak.com. I'm also on Twitter. I'm most active on Twitter. I post tons of GIFs and animations and sounds and many stuff. And also on Discord. We have an official Discord where people can come, drop around, and we are also pretty open to welcome people that are making games. The newsletter is mostly followed by people who wish to make games or are making games. On the Discord, it's a Discord dedicated to our games, but we are having more and more people that are also willing to make games or making games. So we are starting to set up channels for people who make games and exchange tips. So it's pretty cool. It's a community about our games and also a growing community about making games.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your time and for this interview. I'm typically one of these designers who would start with the story and the world design. Now, I also didn't know that tip about closing your eyes and listening to the sound in the game, but it's definitely a good one. Thank you to you who are watching this video. I hope that this was interesting for you as well. You can find links in the video description to FlyingOak Games to follow their work, their Discord, but also the tools that we mentioned. If I forgot anything, please let me know in the comments. Did you like this interview? Do you like this kind of video from time to time? Please let me know as well if you want more. And for now, I'm going to thank you kindly for watching. Be creative, have fun. Let's see one another in the next one. Bye bye.